Alright, you guys, welcome back. Wanted to get this video up here. This is the top 5 reasons to own an M8 Softail. Specifically, the bike I wanted to talk about is my bike. It's a 2020 Lowrider S. It is the Softail platform, but it is the Lowrider. So, in this video, I want to cover a bunch of different features and a bunch of reasons why this is my favorite motorcycle that Harley Davidson has ever produced. Top 5 reasons to own a bike in this category. So number 5 is going to be suspension. So with these models, they wanted to keep the classic lines of the bike. They wanted to make it look more like a hardtail and keep the old school styling of the motorcycle. But what they did was they designed a monoshock up under your seat. So you have more like a sport bike style rear suspension. So a lot of sport style motorcycles in the 80s and 90s were running a monoshock, which is one single shock located under your seat, directly in line with your rear tire and the center lines of the frame. It transfers the shocks of hitting big bumps. It transfers all of that motion directly in line with your frame. So it makes for a very smooth ride. It makes for a very smooth transfer of shock into the motorcycle. It's absorbed completely by that rear monoshock, so it doesn't transfer any of that shock to your body. Absolutely amazing ride on these motorcycles. Also, like I said, I wanted to talk specifically about the Lowrider S. So this bike comes with the inverted front suspension as well. That is something that we've seen on sport bikes from the past. Harley has put it on a couple of their models, like the Roadster. So that was a Sportster, came with inverted front suspension. It was a great handling motorcycle. And that's kind of why I wanted to put this as the number 5, because that design in itself is amazing. It makes the ride of this motorcycle so much more enjoyable. So let's get to number 4. So my number 4 reason to own an M8 Softail is the M8 engine itself. So this engine is completely redesigned from what Harley did in the past. The twin cam engines were completely different. This bike has been reinvented. The engine itself has been through a lot of different trials and tests on the motorcycle. It is counterbalanced, so it gives you a great feeling when you're on the motorcycle. It doesn't vibrate you to death. So to some people that is a pro, to some people that's a con. To me, I love how quiet this engine is. I love how they minimalize the vibration of it. So when you are on like a 2 to 3 hour ride on the highway on this bike, it's not beating you to death. It's a very smooth ride and it is filled with power. So another thing I wanted to touch on here was the 114 engine versus the 117. So now on your Softail models, the newer ones here, I believe 21, 22 and above, you could get the Street Bob with the 114 engine. So the 114 engine is an absolute powerhouse. These are designed to be high output engines, very high horsepower for what they are. So I know the estimates on these engines were around 89 horsepower. That's what people were speculating. Cycle World has done tests on these engines. They ran them just completely stock. So completely stock, the 114 engine was producing 92.7 horsepower. That's pretty good for a stock engine coming from Harley Davidson. So the 117s, which were available and still are available on the Lowrider S and the Lowrider STs for the 2022 model and up, they were making 94.8 horsepower. Again, that is from Cycle World when they dyno tested these bikes, and that was a completely stock engine. So you have a 5% torque increase on the 117 compared to the 114. But these numbers, you guys, you got to understand when Cycle World tested these motorcycles. So the 92.7 horsepower on the 114 came at 3,000 RPM. The 94.8 horsepower on the 117 came in at 4,750 RPM. So that's a huge difference in your revolutions to end up getting those numbers. The 117 is a great engine, but I think the 114, for the size and the capability of this engine, is amazing. I would go with the 114. I love the 117s, but I think the 114 outshines anything else in its competition, and I think it is one of the best platforms to build on. So you're talking about a 5% increase in torque. That was just stock numbers coming out versus the 117 and the 114. I prefer the 114 because there's a lot of aftermarket support for it, and you could get it on the street, Bob. So if you want to get into kind of your entry-level softail with Harley Davidson, you could get that street bob with the 114. They're making pretty comparable horsepower. The Cycle World is saying 92.7. Other people have estimated right around 100 horsepower, just a hair under it. So on this bike, I'm over 100 horsepower. The only things that I did from the factory to this motorcycle, so I put the K&N air cleaner. It's the washable, reusable air cleaner on it to give just a little bit more performance. I did the full 2-into-1 Sawicki Speed Shop exhaust on here, and I did a Power Vision 4 tuner on there so that I could increase my fuel ratio on this bike. So this thing is an absolute monster. It's a powerhouse. It's over 100 horsepower. For me, that's what I want. I don't want to do anything else to this bike at this moment. May do cams later on down the road, but for the way it's performing, and for me, my main reason to get a newer bike, the Softail platform, was the reliability of the engine. So I wanted something I could put tons of miles on, was gonna be reliable. I'm not stunt riding this bike. I'm not beating on this bike. This bike is just very high RPMs, getting on the highway, long rides, cruising, destroying miles. The number 3 reason why I would choose this motorcycle is the rake. So on the Lowrider S, they put a 28-degree rake on this motorcycle. The basic Lowrider model is coming in with a 30-degree rake. So they shortened it by 2 degrees. A lot of people don't think that makes a ton of difference, but when you look at the way this bike handles and performs, that 28-degree rake with that inverted front suspension handles like nothing else on the market. So this bike powers through curves, powers through acceleration, and the braking is improved with that 28-degree rake on there. So the handling on this motorcycle reminds me of a sport bike. The way that I can lean into the bends, the way that I can carve around in the canyons, hitting switchbacks. When I went out to Sturgis and I was blowing through them switchbacks, this bike handled like I was on a R1. So very great with the lean angle. They did increase the rear suspension by doing the monoshock, so that adds to your 28-degree rake. Everything on this bike was designed to give you a sporty, aggressive feel and keep the classic styling of the motorcycle. So on to number 2 is the power to weight ratio. So this bike comes in about 650 pounds wet. The power on it, like I said, I'm over 100 horsepower on this motorcycle with that 650 pound frame, engine, chassis complete. It feels a lot lighter than it really is. So I can throw this bike around when I'm hitting S-bends like I'm on a 500-pound motorcycle, and that is because of the rear monoshock, the added height in the rear, the 28-degree rake on the front, the inverted suspension. Everything works in harmony to deliver you outstanding power in a very low weight platform. So when you get on this bike compared to a Street Glide Special with the 114, you can feel the power instantly on this bike. The weight, almost 300 pounds lighter than a Road Glide or a Street Glide. That power transfers directly to the feel of the motorcycle. This bike feels so much more aggressive than anything in the touring platform. Even the ST models that they came out with that have the larger displacement engines on them, this bike will outperform it. Day and night difference in the power and torque feeling on this motorcycle compared to a touring bike. So that's why my number 2 is the power to weight ratio. Number 1 reason to own an M8 Softail is because this is the best motorcycle produced by Harley Davidson, hands down. I know you guys have heard me say that before about other motorcycles. This to me is the pinnacle of Harley Davidson motorcycles. Hands down, this is the best motorcycle on the market, best motorcycle produced by Harley Davidson. It is a true performance bike right off the factory floor. So if you haven't rode one of these bikes, you're doing yourself a disservice. If you're a touring guy, if you're into the larger bikes, get on one of these and go for a cruise. I guarantee you will have a smile from ear to ear. I guarantee this bike will change the way that you view the Softail platform. So, number 1 reason, best motorcycle produced by Harley Davidson, hands down. If you disagree with me, leave your comment down in the comment section below, and I would love to bring it up. And I can give you about 44 more reasons why this is the best motorcycle produced by Harley. But I want to know, what is your favorite? What is the best Harley produced to you? And give me some reasons why.